Okay, it's 1 o'clock in the UK, so we'll begin. Welcome to this Archiware webinar Wednesday, which is titled Exploring P5 and TrueNAS with open source specialist Starline. So I'm David Fox from Archiware in the UK. That's me on the left-hand side. And with me today, I've got Mohammed Ammar from Starline. Hi, Mohammed.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, David, for the opportunity to join your excellent series of webinars.
We are recording this webinar, so we will make this available on Archiware's YouTube channel, just the same as all of the previous webinars. So if you need to share this with any of your colleagues that you think might be interested, then we'll email you a link to the YouTube video. We'll also take questions at the end of the webinar. So within the go to webinar control panel, there's a questions box. Please, if anything is not covered that you're interested in finding out about during the webinar, type something in there and we'll go through all of your questions at the end. Myself and Ammar will be able to answer those for you. So before I hand over to Ammar, just what we're going to cover in this webinar today is Starline have a range of TrueNAS-based open source storage servers that work really nicely with Archiware P5. Indeed, many of their installations go out with P5 and tape hardware attached. So Ammar's going to give you an introduction to that product. Then I'm going to give a quick overview to Archiware P5 for those that are not familiar with that product. And then we're going to switch into live demo mode. We've got all of this stuff set up ready to show you. We've got a TrueNAS box with the tape library attached. So we'll show you a quick run through of the TrueNAS config, what that looks like, what the capabilities there are, and then look at P5, and then we'll take your questions. So with that, let's learn a little bit more about Starline, Ammar, and you're going to start out with a bit of history behind how you came to be looking for a product like Archiware and why Archiware was chosen. So over to you.
Yeah, thank you, David. Yes, before I discuss the solution itself, I would like to reflect on how we came to collaborate and partner with Archiware. Back in 2019, we were contacted by one of our distributors. He had an important customer who had already bought some free NAS servers from us through him. They were pleased with the servers and with the performance, but they wanted to use tape backups with the systems. Bernd, our sales manager, forwarded the question to me. I knew of multiple open source solutions that can help with that. The problem was that they only run on Linux, thus requiring some sort of a dedicated machine between the FreeNAS server and the tape library. This also meant that the user must expose or share the data that's saved on the FreeNAS server so that the Linux machine, the satellite Linux machine, can access it. This is doable, but it complicates things, and the user has to spend money on an extra machine that does nothing but basically pass the data from the storage to the tape library. I wanted something else. I wanted the FreeNAS server to be able to directly interact with the tape library without an intermediary machine. After some digging around the system and the available online documentations, I figured out how it could be done. I did it, but the problem was that it was done in bash scripting, and because it was terminal-based, it required quite a bit of familiarity with the FreeBSD system and terminal administrative interactions. And obviously, that was not convenient, a convenient solution for the majority of our customers. So I had to look for something that is more user-friendly and hopefully GUI-based, something that can handle single tape libraries and possibly RDX removable storage. I found Archiware's website, and they had a version of their software that was compiled to run on FreeBSD 11, which FreeNAS was based on. Although FreeNAS was based on FreeBSD 11, the software was not installable or usable on FreeNAS, simply because FreeNAS is a stripped down version of FreeBSD that is focused on performing storage operations. So some essential components were missing from the system, and after a bit of tinkering, I managed to get Archiware up and running, and I was quite pleased by how easy it was to add and manage tape and backup storage devices through its web interface. Also, the backup speed was quite impressive. With my findings, I went back to my team and we got in touch with Archiware, with Archiware's team, and at that time, Archiware had already decided to drop support for FreeBSD, which in turn meant that there would be no support for Truenass in the future. We shared our findings and we had a discussion with them. They were quite understanding and they liked our integration, and soon enough decided to continue their support for FreeBSD. Also, the newer version that they released shortly after included all the missing components, which made the installation much easier for the end users. You can just run an installer script and it runs immediately on the operating system. So that was basically our goal, to facilitate admin work, bring down the total cost of ownership, and providing some sort of robust storage and maintenance and backup solution to our customers.
Cool. And it's, well, I think it's worth pointing out that the TrueNAS is a distribution of FreeBSD operating system with a network storage appliance software built in. So it's like it's a distribution, and FreeBSD is an operating system that is like Linux but is not Linux. It stems from the Unix history, but it's a separate branch. And FreeBSD is very much focused on stability and security, so it doesn't receive all of the package updates that the regular Linux distributions receive. It's kind of very much designed to be stable, so it's ideal for something like a storage appliance, and it also supports the OpenZFS file system, which you can see at the top of our slide, which is a open source version of Sun Microsystems' original, now Oracle, very sophisticated file system that includes everything that a RAID controller does and a lot more, all built into the file system. So anyway, I'm stealing your slide, Ammar, so I'll let you continue down those points there.
No, your comments are quite correct. So why Truenass and why Truenass Core? Let me first say that Truenass is the new version of FreeNAS. Most people would be familiar with the old name FreeNAS, but the developing company IX Systems, it's a software company based in the United States, basically merged or transformed the free version of their software FreeNAS into the Truenass Core. It's a very popular open source storage software used by almost millions of users all over the world. Truenass is built around OpenZFS, and OpenZFS is a file system that has many advantages for data storage users. In addition to being a copy-on-write file system, it offers some resilient data storage and protection mechanisms such as checksumming and scrubbing. It also supports deduplication. It supports inline compression for data, so the data gets compressed on the way to the pool. It supports AES standard encryption, which is always enhanced when your hardware, particularly the CPU, supports it. Users can have multiple pools layered on top of different disk types, such as HDD, SSD, and NVMe based pools. The file system can be easily expanded by adding hard drives to the storage pool. It does not require disk partitioning for resizing, etc. So Truenass is built around that. It's built around the OpenZFS file system, and it provides the user with a beautifully designed and easy to use web interface that makes configuring and administering your storage server an easy task.
Yeah, which you'll get to see quite soon.
Yeah. So Truenass adds support for all popular sharing protocols such as SNMP, NFS, AFP, Iscsi, FTP, WebDAV, etc. It supports directory services, LDAP, and Microsoft directory services. Supports snapshots and replication scheduling for remote backups between multiple Truenass systems. It supports certification management, smart disk diagnostics, link aggregation, failover, VLANs, SNMP, It also gives you some sort of real-time performance and monitoring within the GUI, and it supports UPS devices.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, there's support for virtualization using the FreeBSD Beehive hypervisor.
Yeah, so you get
all
a lot of functionality for free, and you can kind of concentrate on your money going towards the hardware, not the software, I guess.
Exactly, and that's something that we would love to thank the developers for, IX Systems for. You get all those benefits basically without licensing fees, and with some excellent community support through the FreeNAS and FreeNAS and the Trunas forums.
Forums, yeah. All right, I'm going to put you on the next slide, Emma.
So the solution we're presenting today is an SSD-based server, and it's designed to provide unthrottled performance for demanding workloads. A popular use case for it is within video production studios, where it can help eliminate the usual post-production bottlenecks stemming from slow storage backends and multi-user pressure. Combining Archiware P5 with our TrueNAS-based solutions doubles your data resilience. TrueNAS running on our hardware provides fast and robust storage pools, while P5 takes care of making sure that your weeks or months' work has been safely backed up, either to tape, external disk, or even cloud storage. Trunas has some features which provide an important protection layer against crypto malware attacks. We will cover this in the next slide. Yep. And our configuration is quite modular, with almost every component from the CPU and RAM all the way to the type of storage devices being configurable according to customer needs. The solution comes configured with some extra storage padding. Increasing your total storage capacity is also possible via JPODs, and we will always assist you throughout the process.
Excellent. So let's just talk a little bit about the ransomware protection that is offered by this solution.
Yeah. Ransomware is quite a hot topic these days, and possibly the most popular question we get from our customers. TrueNAS supports SMB worm, and worm is short for write once, read many. And what it does is that it sets your written data into read-only mode after a specific timeout period. Once the data is read-only, it's no longer modifiable even by the owner. Of course, the user would be able to copy more data to the shared folder, but he wouldn't be able to modify the data after the timeout. This provides an important protection layer against, or an important additional protection layer against crypto malware attacks, because the data saved to the worm is basically read-only once the timeout expires.
Yeah. So you would pick certain shares to apply this SMB worm feature to, where you know that it's not going to be necessary for people to modify data after it's been added. And then obviously other shares would need to remain read-write because of the way that people use them. But OpenZFS also gives you the ability to create timed snapshots. So the entire contents of the storage can be snapshotted and will be stabilized and will be impervious to ransomware attacks. It can't be touched by ransomware at that point. So you've also got the ZFS abilities to help with ransomware. And if you're writing backups and archive data to LTO tape, LTO tape is ransomware proof by design, because a tape is not like a disk. It's not something that can be accessed randomly. It has to be accessed from the beginning to the end of the tape. So tapes can't be rewritten. You can only append data to the end of an LTO tape, or erase the tape and start writing the tape from the beginning again. And the business model, as it were, of ransomware is that they take the ransomware software takes good files and replaces them with encrypted files, and then they try and extort money from you to go back from the encrypted back to the good file. So a good file on a tape cannot be replaced with an encrypted version of that file. That's not how tapes work. So therefore the business model for ransomware doesn't work with tapes. And on top of that, an archive tape, for example, or a backup tape can be removed from the system and placed on a shelf or a fire safe. And then obviously that tape is completely impervious to change by anything, because it's no longer connected to a computer host that can do anything with it at all. So there's a real air gap, I think is the word there, that protects that tape. So
yeah, correct. You can easily remove tapes. You cannot easily remove disk drives from running storage solutions. You would be compromising your pool and your data.
I guess the RDX Tandberg cartridge disk would be the only sort of disk that you can remove in the same way as a tape. So we're showing you here the demo setup that Amar has running at his office in Germany. So do you want to run us through, because I think the point is that we're making here is that Starline, the company, have a range of these FreeBSD based storage servers that they will build for you according to your requirements, and sell and support that as a product and bundle that with tape hardware and with Archiware licenses as needed. So what we've got here is an example of one of those products that consists of a tape and the TrueNAS storage server. And Amar, do you want to take us through the bullets on that one?
Yes, sure. This is the configuration for today's demo server, and this setup is geared towards applications that require high transfer rate and low latency, such as virtualization, database applications, video editing, etc. The default network configuration here is 4 times 10 gigabit Ethernet, but this can be customized based on customers' requirements, all the way up to 100 gigabit for the small 1U or 2U servers, and 200 gigabit Ethernet for the 4U servers. The raw capacity for this configuration is 9.6 terabytes with a usable capacity of 6.6 terabytes and RAID Z2 with 2 VDEVs, which gives the customer the ability to lose up to 4 drives while maintaining access to the data. In this configuration, we went for an AMD EPYC 24-core CPU with hyper-threading, 256 gigabytes of DDR4 Esxi RAM, 10 micron 7300 Pro SSDs, 960 gigabytes each, 2 micron NVMEs for the operating system. Those are 256 gigabyte each. We have the network interfaces, 4 times 10 gigabit Ethernet and 2 times 25 gigabit Ethernet, plus the IBMI management port. We have Archiware P5 Archive Edition installed, and the Tandberg 8-tape library bundled with the solution.
Yeah, which is the 1U library that you can see in the illustration there. So next, on the next slide, yeah, let's do this slide next. So these solutions, Amar, are not just sold and then you forget about them. You're selling it with a various different support options, from installation through to upgrading software through to replacing parts should they fail at various different reaction times. I think one of the points that we discussed earlier that you were quite keen to stress was that FreeBSD, the operating system, doesn't have such a wide support for hardware as a distribution of Red Hat or Ubuntu and so on, which have very, very wide support for PC compatible cards and so on. So FreeBSD is more fussy about what it supports, or at least it deliberately has a narrower support because of the kind of operating system that it is. So obviously all your hardware is built for full compatibility with network adapters, host bus adapters, and SAS cards and so on.
Because of the way FreeBSD community adopts newer technologies, some hardware that is popular within the Linux community is not supported by FreeBSD. Add to that the fact that Trunas, the operating system for Trunas, is a stripped-down version of FreeBSD. So there is even a more limited number of like network interfaces and HBAs and RAID adapters and things like that that can be supported by the operating system. So the thing to mention here is that even though the Trunas is FreeBSD based, it does not run well on any hardware configuration, and many popular components won't even get detected by the system. For instance, support for the latest AMD CPUs is pretty recent. Also, network adapters from some popular providers such as QLogic mostly don't work on the operating system, under the operating system. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And do you just want to run us through the various support and assistance options that you offer with your products?
Yeah, we provide on-site remote installation for the system, installation and configuration for the system. We can support the customers if they want to buy the solution blank and do the installation and configuration on-site. We provide annual software and hardware updates and maintenance to the solution. We also provide hardware on-site support to the customer. Next business day support, spare parts and hardware warranty up to 5 years, and the different support packages based on what the customer actually needs. If you need next business day support, it's available. If you need 24/7 support for the hardware, it's available. 3 years warranty for the hardware, or up to 5 years warranty for the hardware. It's also available.
Excellent. Right, so we thought we'd give a little illustration of pricing here. So we have some different solutions here, starting at the top with the demo setup that you saw in the graphic earlier that included the 1U 8-slot tape library with a single drive and the P5 license for backup and archiving. So that one comes in at approximately 17,500 euros. And Amar, then we've got like an upgraded version of that, right?
Correct. Yeah, the solution and the demo comes with the Archiware license and with the tape library, and we offer upgrade packages up to 20 times 2 terabyte SSD drives with up to 512 gigabytes of RAM with the overland 24 tape, the T24 LTO8 tape library.
Yeah.
But we also offer different packages. We offer entry-level out-of-the-box solutions with ranging from 4 bays all the way to 12 bays. With single and multi-tape devices. Yeah. We also always offer the customer CTO option, like custom to order option. So usually we always have a discussion with the customer. We don't just sell something that is like one size fits all. We have a discussion with the customer and we discuss their actual needs with their expected performance levels and throughputs, and then we compose a solution that is basically tailored to address their needs. So the CTO option is always there, and it's the first thing that we offer the customer. If we get a call from a customer saying that I want to buy the full NVMe 36-bay chassis from you, we just take a couple of minutes to discuss their needs. Maybe that's not what you actually want to spend your money on.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. So thanks for the introduction, Amar, for the TrueNAS products that you sell. I'm just going to give you a quick rundown of Archiware P5 for those in the audience that might not have familiarity with it. So I'd also like to add that we just released version 7 of P5 yesterday. So if you are a P5 customer or partner, then make sure you check out the new version, everything that's new in there on Archiware's website. So Archiware is a software platform for data storage, particularly popular within the media and entertainment space where people have a lot of data to manage. And we help them manage that data through these 4 different products that you can see here. So we have a backup product, which is there as a disaster recovery tool for migrating data offline onto disk, LTO, tape or cloud. Then we have P5 Archive, which is similar to to the backup product, but it's basically archiving for the long term. In fact, I think I've got the descriptions the wrong way around for these two boxes, so apologies for that. So P5 Archive is archiving data from your disk storage onto either disk tape or cloud storage, so that you have a long-term archive copy of that data. Maybe then you can remove that from your live storage because you have duplicated redundant archive, which is also possible with P5. And then you make free space for incoming work. But if you need to pull something back from that archive because you need to do a new revision of it or something like that, then that's very simple using P5 Archive. P5 Synchronize is replicating data for high availability. So it's basically a file and folder copy of a portion of your data from your live production storage to another host, to another file system. Could be on the same building across a LAN, could be across a wide area network to a remote location. And finally, P5 Backup to Go over there on the right is our workstation backup product, which would allow a number of Mac and PC workstations, laptops and desktops to back up to a centralized server resource. And again, that could be the TrueNAS device using the ZFS file systems. So just to go into a bit more detail about where you can run P5, obviously you can run on FreeBSD on the TrueNAS operating system. We also run on Windows, Mac and Linux. We are in the QNAP, Synology and Netgear NAS stores, so you can just search in their stores to find us. And there is also an Amazon Web Services Marketplace distribution of Ubuntu Linux plus P5 pre-installed that you can deploy in the cloud. But you can deploy in any cloud that supports Linux or Windows. So a single installer installs all 4 modules on one of these operating systems, and then you license the product to determine which bits are available to you. And the backup and archive products support disk, cloud, and LTO tape as the target storage. So you can back up and archive to any kind of disk storage. You can back up and archive to cloud buckets from Amazon, Microsoft, Backblaze, Wasabi, Google. So all of the main cloud providers are supported by us for backup and archive. And then, of course, the most popular storage that we see in media and entertainment still is LTO tape, either single drives or libraries across all generations of LTO, current one being 8. 9 should be available this year. With even higher capacity. We support multiple LTO drives at the same time in parallel for either redundancy or for improved increased throughput. And in latest versions of P5 support LTFS archival tape format, which is a non-proprietary tape format. And we are, I think, the only commercial product that supports LTFS on TrueNAS or indeed FreeBSD. So a couple of slides just to illustrate how you might use these 4 different modules in conjunction with the TrueNAS and the tape product. So for backup and archive, we would take our TrueNAS hardware, you can see at the top of my slide, and you can either do the LTO backup, so you're going to use the SAS interface between the TrueNAS box and the tape library to do backup and archive directly to LTO. Or you could do the same workflow to cloud storage from one of those cloud vendors I already mentioned. Or you can configure some disk storage mounted across the network, probably in this case, to back up and archive to some other disk storage that's off of the TrueNAS device for sort of redundancy. And then if you were looking to do synchronization, i.e. replication, or backup of workstations, then I've just put together these couple of graphics to show that you could take the disks on the left-hand side there from the TrueNAS appliance, and over the LAN or WAN, you can replicate that across to another host. It could be any one of the operating systems that you saw P5 running on. So that could be a QNAP, it could be a Synology, it could be a Mac Mini with some storage attached. Whatever you've got, you can run P5 on there and hook up the TrueNAS appliance so that you can replicate. And this is a file and folder replication. We can, if the target storage supports ZFS, then we can make snapshots on that target storage to retain old versions of your data. And then on the right hand side, I've kind of indicated a number of workstations that are backing up to the storage hosted by the TrueNAS hardware. So you can use that to have a centrally administered backup of any number of Mac and Linux desktops, all saving themselves in an automated fashion back to the TrueNAS, and we include the client software that runs on those workstations so that they can trigger their own backups, and we have a web interface that allows all of them to browse their own backups and recover stuff. So I'm going to give you a live demo in a sec, but I just wanted to focus on this window from our P5 web administration that shows a view of a folder that we archived in the past. So this is data that has been archived to tape and deleted from the storage. So this data just now exists on tape, but we can still browse it and search it, see file names, see thumbnails, including of video files, and play back proxies that we have created, low-res small proxies, so you have a way to see a piece of media so that you can decide if that is the media that you want to recover from tape. And finally, we have captured metadata on the bottom right of my slide, where we can read data in from the asset itself on the file system from within the file and store that in our index so that is both browsable and searchable. So when we archive something in P5, whether it's to cloud, to disk, or to LTO tape, this index allows us to track everything that we've ever archived through searching, through viewing, through metadata, so that you can decide what it is that you want to recover from your archive. So it's a very visual mechanism that we have for browsing archived data. So with that, I'm going to flick across to my other window here, where we've got a remote connection to a Windows host, which is sitting in Starline's office, which has a 25 gigabit Ethernet connection to the TrueNAS appliance, which is called jerry.starline.de, and we're now looking at the dashboard screen. So Amar, can I hand over to you for you to give us a little tour of what we're looking at here?
Yes, sure. So this is basically the landing page for the Trunas GUI. And this is where you can have an overall view of various system parameters such as CPU, pool, and memory utilization, or also network utilization. I will run you quickly through different configuration parameters that are available within the GUI. Most of those are quite obvious, so I won't go into much detail when I'm going over them. Here you can set users, groups and user accounts. For those user accounts would be used when you're sharing the data via different protocols, especially when you're sharing the data via NFS and SMB protocols. Here you can set the basic system configurations in the General tab. You can choose which SSL certificate to use and whether you want to use HTTPS or not, and setting the GUI language. One important thing that you should always configure is in NTP servers, because this can affect when the server is basically timestamping the data or interacting with other servers that you run replications to. One other thing that I want to highlight is the Update tab, where you can check for updates for the operating system, and the newly introduced feature of the two-factor authentication, where you can set up your mobile phone to provide you with two-factor authentication codes to access the management GUI. Without this code, no one would be able to access your system and compromise your data. Tasks is where you set up replication tasks and scrub tasks, and those are quite important. Replications are basically snapshots that are taken of your data and saved to a remote Trunas box. This box can be either within your physical network or in a completely different geographical location. Scrub tasks is also important. It's basically scrubbing is basically ZFS going over the data and making sure each data block matches its checksum. If there is a difference, ZFS will automatically correct the block, and if you care about your data, if this data is important, it's advised to run it at least once a week.
Yeah, this is what's known as bit rot, isn't it, Amar, where a single, like hard drives have a lot of bits on them, and if one of them were to flip, I think it's probably more common with spinning disks than ZFS is a kind of fast system that can actually detect that in its downtime. It can be scrubbing and checking every block on the disk to make sure that it still has matches the checksum that was stored. And this is all happening all the time with ZFS automatically, the checksumming.
You can, it does happen, and the ECC memory also helps with protecting your data, but the scrubbing is a scheduled task that you basically, it scrubs the entire pool or the pools that you have within the system to basically try and detect any bit rotting within the pool.
Yeah.
Here you can configure your pools and your data set. A dataset is like a fancy name for a folder or a directory within ZFS. So when you're creating a dataset, you're almost creating a directory, and you can later on set permissions to that directory, select which users who can access it, which sharing protocol is this dataset going to be exposed over, etc. It includes also support for Vmware Snapshots, which is a great feature. Here you can also import disks or data from external disks, and it supports 4 different disk formats. You just need to attach the disk via USB and select from this is already self-explanatory. Sharing is where you basically share data sets that you created in the storage menu. There's support for AFB, Iscsi, NFS, WebDAV, and SMB shares. And when it comes to SMB, this is how you basically configure the worm share from here, from the drop-down, and you select worm, and it says file becomes read-only via SMB after 5 minutes. This 5 minutes timeout is configurable by us. We can set it according to user needs. Services is basically where you enable and disable the sharing and different services that run on the system. Here is one other neat feature, which is virtualization, and it's a wizard-based, easy-to-use setup that basically you select which type of the operating system you want to run on top of the FreeNAS or the TrueNAS box. Give a description. Then as you proceed, you need to define how much RAM and CPU cores you want to assign for this specific VM. You define which ISO file you will use for setting up the VM, and you would be done with it in a couple of minutes.
You mentioned
also
some customers, Amar, that are running Windows VMs on your boxes so that they can run some specialist transcoding workflows, maybe, so that they can incorporate transcoding workflows into the same appliance.
Yeah, exactly. We have a customer. They are a video editing studio here in Germany, and they have this piece of software that only runs on Windows, and they wanted to run some sort of an encoding job that fetches the data from the server and saves the data to another machine. So I proposed to them to install a Windows VM on top of the TrueNAS box. We copied the software onto it, and we ran it, and it runs fine for them.
Yeah. One of the things I also wanted to note was that ZFS is obviously a big part of the power of the TrueNAS appliance, and people will have noticed that this appliance, although it doesn't have a huge amount of disk storage, it's got 256 gigabytes of RAM. Partly that's because the ZFS replaces the need for a RAID card. So ZFS does its own striping of data across the disks, and it introduces its own redundancy data so that you can lose disks within a ZFS pool Remember that the ZFS pool will still operate. Indeed, I think you said you can use 4 disks across this 10 disk configuration, and you won't lose any data because it's basically providing the same redundancy that a RAID 60 array would provide, but it's doing all of that within the ZFS software, and therefore a lot of the RAM will be used by ZFS to provide those services. So that 256 gigabytes of RAM is largely spec'd to make sure that ZFS is able to be very fast with the storage. Also using it for caching.
A few things here is, first, usually we don't use RAID cards or never use RAID cards with ZFS systems. It's not required, and it's some money that would be wasted if you have fast enough hard drives and fast enough hardware. You are correct that ZFS runs its own RAID setup, and if you go here and you click on the status of the pool, you would see that we have set up this pool on over two VDEVs or virtual devices. Each virtual device is set up as a RAID Z2, which means you can lose any 2 hard drives within this VDEV, and any 2 hard drives within this VDEV, you can lose up to 4 hard drives within this pool without affecting data. You would be still able to access your data. There is this notion that you cannot use RAID cards with ZFS or OpenZFS. You can, but the thing is, if you remove this card and let me state it like this: you should always be able to remove this card and plug your drives directly into your backplane or into the main board and access your pool. If you cannot access your pool, when you remove the RAID card, then this is a very bad choice for you.
Yeah, you don't want to be at the mercy of a particular vendor's RAID hardware in order to be able to access your data.
Exactly. The other thing about the RAM is I always say that the ZFS is the file system equivalent of Cookie Monster. It just eats RAMs instead of cookies. So it uses RAM to cache reads. And this is why it's so fast when you're trying to access a specific file again and again and again. Once this file is read from the hard drives, is stored in the RAM, and the more you read that file, the more it stays in the RAM, and any newer file that gets read from the hard drives gets added to the RAM. So if you have a large amount of users that are accessing relatively larger files, like video files or things like that, you should equip your server with as much RAM as you can afford, or as much RAM as your requirements as you need, basically.
Cool. Okay. Was there any more of the TrueNAS UI that you wanted to run through before I go into the P5 side of things?
No, let's go into the P5.
Yeah, I think we're doing well on time. We're going to have some time at the end left for questions. Right. So as you just saw, I flicked tabs there. Both the TrueNAS, if I flick back, and P5 both use a browser, and everything is presented via the browser interface for configuration and administration. So this is the login page for P5, and I'm just logging in using the default password. So this is what P5 looks like in the browser. You can see the 4 different modules: backup to go, synchronize, and archive across the top there, plus the restore tab over here, which is where you go to browse that index that I mentioned earlier, where you would go to recover files from tape that you'd archived some time ago, for example. And then over on the right-hand side, we have ways of monitoring running jobs in the browser. So you can see completed jobs on the bottom of the window, running jobs at the top. And over here we have video trainings, PDF manuals, lots of sort of other stuff. This is version 7, which was actually released yesterday. So if you're a P5 user, or partner, then go check out the version 7, find out what's new. So I'm going to focus on the archive tab, and we're going to have a little look at how we might do some archiving of data to tape, because we have this TrueNAS configuration with the Tandberg Overland tape library attached. So in the archive tab here, in the storage manager section, I can see I have a tape library, which is actually showing up as a BDT Flex store. I think they're the manufacturer of the library, and you can see this has first slot is 1, last slot is 8, so this is capable of holding 8 tapes, and at the same time within it, it has a tape drive, which is a Ultrium 7 drive, which you can see detailed here. Now, within the storage manager section here, you can also go configure what's called container storage, which is the new feature of version 7. And you see here I can add cloud storage or local disk storage to create a storage container. And that's something that I can back up and archive to just the same way that I can back up and archive to LTO. So I could configure an AWS S3 or a Backblaze cloud bucket, for example, and have a single flexible elastic storage container that I can back up and archive to, and P5 will handle all of the upload and download to the cloud as needed. But today we're going to focus on tape, so let's just flick back to there. So I have got a storage pool configured, which is called Tape Archive. And you'll see that there's 1 volume in this storage pool, and that equates to, under the volume section, I have 1 tape, which is currently in one of the slots in the tape library. And so in order to archive some data to that tape, we have to create an archive plan, which is what we have here. If I double click on him, then we get to see what the settings are. So I have my target storage set to be my tape archive. If I click on the options tab here, we have various options like do we want to do verification via checksums of data that is written to the tape? That's a good idea. Do we want to immediately delete the files that we have archived, so we immediately free up space after those have been archived off the tape? Do we want to do incremental or full archives? Under my previews tab here, I have an ImageMagick preview generator. ImageMagick is built into P5. That's an open source tool that can generate thumbnails of static image files. And then we have FFmpeg, which is another open source tool which can generate those small proxies of video and audio files that I'll show you in a sec. We can also import metadata via some simple scripts so that we capture data about the files that we're archiving, so we can search on that later. And then finally, if we want to do manual archiving, I can actually browse the SMB share that is hosted on the TrueNAS device directly within here, and then I can browse the data that is sitting on that share. So I have a folder here called P5 Data where I have downloaded some open source CCTV movie files. So these are live on the file system. These are files that I may have finished working with that I want to archive. So I can simply make a selection of these files, and I can add those to my archive selection within this interface. That pops up in a little palette window over the top. I can then go browse to other folders and add other files or folders to the list of things I want to archive. And when I've arrived at my set of things I want to archive on this run, I just use the archive button. Maybe include some description metadata that we can search on later, and then I'll start my job. And then if everything's working okay, we should be able to see, I didn't think that was quite right. The volume, the tape is not being seen currently by the library. So let me just try and remedy that. We did have a little connectivity problem with the library earlier. Let me just do an inventory of the tape library using the media label, and I think that tape is in slot 6. Is that right? Was it in slot 6, Hammer?
I'm not quite sure. I think it was 5.
Okay, let's do 5 to 6 then to be sure. So basically, because we just rebooted the hardware, and there are no barcodes attached to the tape in the library, the tape library doesn't currently know what tapes it has. So I've just triggered a mount inventory job, which is going to pick up the tapes that it finds across slots 5 and 6 and then it will look at the tapes to figure out which tapes they are. This would be immediate if we had barcodes attached, but this is a demo configuration. So I'm just going to leave that running. We'll come back to that window in a sec when it should have updated and this archive job should have run. And I'm going to flick over to the Restore tab at the top here, where we can go browse inside of our archive index to see some files and folders that were previously archived to tape. So when I go into the archive index, I simply see the paths that exist on the machine from which I may have archived in the past. So here's my SMB folder, here's my P5 data folder, and here are a load of AVI files that were archived previously. So you can see there's an archive date, so these were archived a few days ago, and that's the modification date on the file system. And if I double click on one of these individual files, I'll get to see, in fact, let me just pick one where I know that there was a bit more movement in the video. I'll get to see a video playing back. You can see there's a guy walking across the car park. These are CCTV files. So I can get a little playback of that media file. This proxy can be whatever resolution, whatever duration you want it to be. And I can also see at the top that this file exists on our tape, which is the tape which is being loaded into the library right now. And I can also browse any metadata that's been ingested from this file at the bottom there. And that goes for any of these files. For each one, we store a preview, we store metadata, and we store the location or locations of where that file has been archived. Might be cloud, might be a tape. When I'm in a folder of media files like this, I can switch on my gallery pane, and then I've got a asset management style overview of all the files in this folder. Or I can indeed switch on my information panel, which is another column where I will see a preview of a file, and any captured metadata will appear at the bottom there. Of course, I can search. So if I'm just interested in the hospital files, for example, I can make a search where the file name contains the word hosp, and that will show up my corresponding hospital video files, so I can hone in on what I'm really interested in. And I could make that search go down to a date, so I could see I'm interested in files that were archived on a particular date or within a particular time range. So the index is a database that allows you full access to everything that you've archived historically, so that you can easily find stuff to pull back from, in this case, LTO tape, back to the storage within the TrueNAS appliance. So let's just go back to here, and our mount inventory did find our tape, our archive tape, in slot 5. So that means that in a couple of minutes, you'll see this job is going to check again in about a minute's time. That will start writing the data to the tape. You'll see that working. So I'll just leave that there. So the other way that you can archive that might be of interest is within our archive plan, we have the concept of an auto archiver, excuse me, whereby we can specify the host that we want to archive from, and a list of directories and a schedule down at the bottom. And that means that you can have a hot folder on your TrueNAS storage, which will be archiving a set folder or list of folders on a set time schedule. So you can have users put completed project work directories into a location on the storage, and then Archiware will sit there at night and run and write that archive data off to whatever storage you want it to. Maybe run more than once to have it on tape and in the cloud, and then optionally can delete the data from the disk to free up space. And when you do that, of course, your backups get smaller as well, because you're not hoarding lots of completed project work on disk that doesn't really need to be there anymore. Okay, so I'm just looking at the clock. I see it's 5 minutes to the hour. So I think what we'll do now is we'll take a look to see if there are any questions that you guys have been asking. And I see there's a few there. I am happy to take more questions if anybody's thinking of anything right now that they'd like to ask. So I think this might be a question that was entered before we kind of answered this question, but somebody's saying, why so much RAM? So yeah, that's basically because the FreeBSD TrueNAS is using the ZFS file system, which basically handles the task of a RAID controller in software. and therefore requires a load of RAM to cache and so on. Probably needs more RAM than you would use on a RAID controller, but then I think the way that the ZFS caches means that the performance is better than a RAID controller is going to be. I've got a follow-up question to that, which was, and you might be able to answer this, Amar, is it possible, do you allocate RAM to the ZFS file system? Do you choose how much of that 256 gigs worth of RAM you're going to use for ZFS, or does the operating system take care of it for you?
Okay, let me quickly reflect on both questions. ZFS, the rule of thumb is that you use 1 gigabyte of RAM per terabyte of storage capacity. But as I have already said, this solution is geared towards a usage environment where we know that the users are going to be reading large files, and ZFS caches all the files it reads from the data pool into the RAM. So if I know that the users are saving and reading relatively large files, 10 gigabyte or maybe 50 or 100 gigabyte each, and I know that I will have like 10 or 20 users accessing this system, retrieving and saving large files, it makes much more sense, knowing that ZFS is caching all the reads in the RAM, to add as much RAM as those users would need to be able to extract and basically retrieve those files as fast as possible from the RAM. Mm-hmm. If you know this, you would configure your system according to the needs and not according to the basic rule of thumb. If I go with the basic rule of thumb, I would be going with like 12 or 16 gigabytes of RAM for the solution, but it would never perform as intended. The other question is that technically you can define how much RAM ZFS can use, but you have to modify the code, the source code for it. And the default usage, RAM usage for the ZFS file system is almost like 90 or 95% of the available RAM. The operating system itself is so efficient, excuse me, the operating system itself is so efficient, it does not require much RAM. The RAM is actually eaten by the ZFS file system. This is why I call it the RAM cookie monster.
Indeed, it's good for RAM sales. Got a question from Mike, who is asking, can I hook up my VMware Esxi to TrueNAS storage via Iscsi protocol? So I think, did you mention earlier that the Iscsi is one of the types of shares that you can create on?
Of course, yeah. It's supported here under sharing and then block share, and it's also a GUI-based, wizard-based thing. It's just 3 or 4 steps, and you have your Iscsi LAN up and running, and then you can attach your VMware storage to it. The thing here is that if you're using your server exclusively for Iscsi access, keep in mind that fragmentation is your enemy, and you should keep between 30 and 40% free space within your pool if you want to maintain good performance between the VMware and the Trunas server. So you have to spec your server with a little bit more storage padding for that specific purpose.
Okay. Question from Nate says, how reliable are modern server SSDs with regards to, I think there's a misspelling there, but I think he means like how many writes can they take? I know like consumer level SSDs can be kind of limited, and it's about where, isn't it? So you're using 1 terabyte, but these are like Micron server grade NVMe SSDs. So I guess it's a question about the kind of the write life cycle of these devices. What's it like?
Yeah, correct. In all of our servers, we never use consumer grade components. No spinning hard drives, no consumer grade SSDs. or NVMEs, we're using server grade and data center grade hardware. And one thing we always consider the total drive writes per day, and we use drives that can sustain multiple drive writes per day, 1.52 drive writes per day, up to maybe 3 or 4 drive writes per day.
So you mean the entire capacity of the drive being written each day? So if it's a 2 terabyte SSD, then it can take 2 to 3 terabytes of data every day. Wow.
Every day for 5 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's one thing. The other thing is that enterprise grade SSDs have power failure support, which can help with protecting data in the event of power interruption. Of course, our servers always have dual power supplies, and usually they are connected to UPS devices, but it's always useful to have any extra layer of protection that you can obtain, and all the enterprise grade hard drives that we use have power failure protection embedded in them.
Excellent. So that answers that one. I think that's it for questions for now, and it's exactly or just 1 minute past the hour. So we've got everything into the time frame that we were aiming to. A couple of people are putting thanks comments in the questions, so that's great. You're very welcome. So oh yeah, before we go, I was just going to see if that job completed. I think it will have done. Yeah, it did. So you see our tape archive job completed with a green light next to it. So that means that the data that we selected, these various hospital AVI files, were written to our tape and are now safely stored, including 9 clips, which are the previews that we generated from those files. So yeah, that all worked fine, and then we could restore that back from tape if we wanted to. So thanks, Amar. That was really good content. Let me just flick back to our slides for the final things. So before we go, I just have a question from Felix. How would be best approach for the end user? So I guess that's directed to Starline. How should Felix get in touch to learn more? Amma, what's the best way for him to do it? I do have a slide here with your website on it. So there's that.
Yeah. He can browse to our website, and all the contacts are available there. If you have specific questions, you are more than welcome to send an email to me, m.amar@starline.de.
I've just put that slide back up with your contact details on Amar. So yeah, send an email over directly to Amar, and I'm sure he'll be happy to help. And I'm pleased that it's been of interest. Felix says thanks, so that's understood. So yeah, let me just go back to the final slides. So this is the Archiware URL. Actually, I need to update this because the domain has slightly changed. So we are now www.archiware.com to get to the download links, but if you just visit the Archiware website or Google Archiware, you'll find it. There's a 5 or 30-day free trial evaluation license available for anybody that wants to have a play with P5. Archiwares are happy to assist with trial downloads. Plus, you can always grab the latest version of the software from that link, where you can also get hold of version 7. Which as mentioned, and just to reiterate, starline.de is where you need to go to learn more about these TrueNAS ZFS-based storage solutions. Really enjoyed learning more about your solution, Amar, and thanks ever so much for explaining it, all the features about it so clearly. So with that, thanks again, and we'll see you all at the next webinar Wednesday. Thanks again, Amar.
Thank you. Cheers.
Cheers, everybody.